On today's episode, I'll break down Duncan Keith being a first-ballot Hall of Famer and the recent rumors of Anton Frondell going before Michael Misa in the NHL Draft.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can go and check me out on X at Jack Bushman 2, but make sure to follow my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey. That way you don't miss out on any of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. To open things up on the show here today, I, of course, got to start off by saying congratulations to three-time Stanley Cup champion, two-time Norris Trophy winner, two-time Olympic gold medalist, and the 2015 Conn Smythe Trophy winner, Duncan Keith, for officially being named a first-ballot Hall of Famer earlier this afternoon, getting inducted into the Hall with legends like Zdeno Chara, Joe Thornton, and Alex McGillney as part of the 2025 Hall of Fame class. So well-deserved for Duncan Keith, and no real surprise that he gets into the Hall in his first opportunity, considering the illustrious resume that he racked up in his NHL career. Keith, of course, spent 16 of his 17 NHL seasons here in Chicago with the Blackhawks after being drafted in the second round of the 2002 NHL Draft. This, 5'11", 6 foot, underweight, gangly left-handed defenseman out of Michigan State. No one was exactly sure what he was going to go on to be as a young man, but of course we know turned out to be, in my opinion at least, and I think in lots of Blackhawks fans' opinions, the greatest defenseman in franchise history, and that's truly saying something. But considering, again, the resume that Keith racked up here in Chicago, I think he's deserving of that title. Among all defensemen in Blackhawks history, he's first in games played with 1,192. He's second in assists with 520, second in points with 625, third in goals with 105, and fourth in postseason games with 135. But perhaps more impressive than even all of those numbers, Blackhawks fans, is the fact that Duncan Keith led this team in ice time in all 16 seasons that he spent with the franchise. He's also just one of 14 players in NHL history to win the Norris Trophy on multiple occasions. He was, of course, the unanimous selection to win the Conn Smythe Trophy in 2015, one of the most incredible postseasons we've ever seen from an NHL defenseman. 21 points in 23 games, 3 goals, most of them being very clutch, along with 18 assists in 23 postseason games, while averaging 31 minutes and 7 seconds of time on ice per night. I mean, truly mind-boggling numbers that Duncan Keith was averaging more than half the game of ice time. And I know during that 2015 postseason run, we had a lot of crazy double overtime games, even a triple overtime game as well. But still, 31 minutes and 7 seconds per night. And it's not like Duncan Keith was playing the most meaningful minutes in every single game. Power play, penalty kill, in the defensive zone when the Blackhawks needed to get the puck out, when it was time to go in the offensive zone and make something happen offensively. Duncan Keith was always out there because he's truly one of the most jack-of-all-trades players in NHL history. And that's why he was named to the top 100, part of the NHL's 100th anniversary roster, 3-time All-Star here in Chicago. Truly, the Blackhawks would not be Stanley Cup champions in 2010, 2013, and 2015 without this guy. I know Patrick Kane, a lot of people consider him to be the most talented player of that Blackhawks dynasty era. Jonathan Toews was no doubt the leader. Marian Hossa was the two-way play type of guy. But Duncan Keith was the glue that kept it all together and the engine that kept it running because of his ability to give you everything, despite being, not at that era's stereotypical size of a number one defenseman, right? He kind of changed the mold of defensemen in the 2010s. And a lot of these undersized, offensive-minded, puck-moving, good skating defensemen molded themselves after Duncan Keith because of the success that he found and the way that he went about his business for all of those years. And it truly was just such an honor and so special to have him as a staple of the blue line for so long, to have him as an alternate captain for so long, and to just be part of this organization for 16 seasons. We were truly so blessed to have Duncan Keith and everything he was able to provide for this franchise, coming up in the clutch, blocking shots, clearing pucks off of the goal line, being out there for, a 2 to 3 minute shift and somehow still having the energy to go right back out there a minute or two later. I mean, the guy had lungs truly like any other NHL player I think we've ever seen. So hats off to Duncan Keith. Again, so well-deserved for being a first ballot Hall of Famer. Cannot wait to see that number 2 sweater retired in the rafter in a couple of years. But before I move on into segment 2, let me know your favorite Duncan Keith moment of all time down below in the comment section. There's a slew of them. I think we'll probably see the same ones pop up every now and then, but I'm interested to see. I'm sure there are some different ones from multiple people out there. So make sure to go and let me know in the comment section your favorite Duncan Keith moment of all time. A couple that came to mind when kind of prepping for this segment on the show. The number one moment of Duncan Keith was undoubtedly for me the game-winning goal that he scored in 2015 Game 6 at the United Center to put the Blackhawks ahead 1-0, jumping on that rebound and beating Ben Bishop glove high. Of course, it would go on to be the game-winning goal because that was Duncan Keith's postseason. That was his Conn Smythe Trophy run. So it was only fitting that he would go on to score the Stanley Cup clinching goal in Game 6 on home ice to help the Blackhawks lift the Stanley Cup at the United Center. The only time they got to do that during their dynasty era. That's the number one Duncan Keith moment for me. Number 2 is probably him getting hit in the chops in Game 4 of the Western Conference Final in 2010, losing 7 teeth, only to come back in return, help the Blackhawks clinch that victory and get back to the Stanley Cup for the first time since the early 1990s. 7 teeth, didn't matter. Duncan Keith he would do anything to go back out there on the ice and give it his all. So that's definitely a moment that stands out to me. 2015, Game 1, double overtime winner against the Nashville Predators. I believe the Blackhawks were down 3-0 in that game. I think Corey Crawford actually got pulled, and that's what started the Scott Darling run. I believe Darling was electric down the stretch of that Game 1 I believe he didn't allow a goal to help the Blackhawks come back, but Duncan Keith with the double OT winner, followed by the lasso celebration. That one was absolutely epic. And this one is maybe a little bit controversial, but still one of my favorite Duncan Keith moments of all time. And as someone that went to college in the state of Missouri and was surrounded by Blues fans all the time, I know he wasn't the one who laid the hit, but wakey, wakey Bacchus is something I'll be saying to my Blues friends for literally ever. One of my favorite quotes of all time. I know it came after a pretty dirty hit from Brent Seabrook, but with the rivalry being what it was at that point in time in the postseason, wanted to beat the Blues more so than anything. Duncan Keith saying wakey, wakey Bacchus is something that may be wrong, but will always give me a chuckle the rest of my life. Again, drop in the comment section below your favorite Duncan Keith moment during his illustrious NHL career. But one final time, congratulations and well-deserved to Duncan Keith, first ballot Hall of Famer. That was next in line for a guy who's won 3 Stanley Cups, 2 Norris trophies, 2 Olympic gold medalists, and oh yeah, a Conn Smythe on top of it. He deserves to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Congratulations to Duncan Keith for finally, I guess not finally, he got in on his first opportunity, but for getting his day and being announced as part of the 2025 Hall of Fame class. Coming up in just a moment, Blackhawks fans, you're going to want to stick with me for segment 2 as I'll break down Chris Peters' crazy 2025 NHL Mock Draft. But first, real quick, I do got to talk to you all about Wonderful Pistachios. Are you looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Well, then go and crack into a great source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. And Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts, with each 1 ounce serving having over 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily nutritional value. Plus, They're packed with fiber to help keep you feeling fuller longer. And who doesn't love a good pistachio? I mean, come on. I know I certainly do. I could sit there literally eating them and cracking them all day long. And that satisfying feeling of opening each shell, it's like a perfect mini snack meditation. And whether you're running between meetings or dropping the kids off at soccer practice this summer, or whatever it may be, Wonderful Pistachios are the snack that works as hard as you do. So get snackin' and get crackin' with the snack that packs a protein punch by visiting wonderfulpistachios.com in order to learn more. Again, that's wonderfulpistachios.com to go and check it out today. Before I get into segment 2, just a quick reminder to please go and hit that like button and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube if you're enjoying what you're watching here today. And if you enjoy what you're listening to through an audio platform, please make sure to go and rate and review the podcast as well, preferably with a 5-star rating. Those always put a big smile on my face. But all of that is 100% free, will not cost you anything, and really helps me out in a massive way in growing my platform. But segment 2 here today, it's time to dive into another 2025 NHL Mock Draft here on the show, as we're now just 3 days away from the fun getting started. And with lots of crazy rumors and rumblings and chatter circling around the top of the 2025 draft class, definitely wanted to get into the most interesting and crazy, peculiar mock draft that I've seen thus far from none other than Chris Peters of Flow Hockey, prospect analyst for them, someone I use in my rankings that I look at for every single one of my prospects in my 2025 NHL draft profiles. But with recent rumors going on about maybe Anton Frondell going ahead of Michael Misa in the 2025 draft class, I definitely had to get into this mock draft, as well as just all the overall uncertainty of what's going to happen in this round 1 on Friday. It truly feels about as open as any draft that I've seen since covering the show. So definitely wanted to get into Chris Peters' mock draft just to give all of us an idea of the craziness that could ensue on Friday afternoon. I know the NHL draft tends to be cut and dry. A lot of these rumors that we hear in the days leading up end up being smokescreens, but I don't know if that's necessarily the case here for the 2025 draft. So kicking things off for Chris Peters' mock draft at number 1, the New York Islanders. He does still have them selecting Matthew HOFer at this point in time. I'd say it's 99.9% certain to be Matthew HOFer going 1 to the New York Islanders. Number 2, though, has gotten more interesting over the last few days. In Chris Peters' mock draft here, he has the San Jose Sharks selecting Anton Frondell over Michael Misa. And I mentioned there have been some rumblings in the last few days that some teams prefer Anton Frondell over Michael Misa. Here's what Chris Peters had to say in his reaction or in his explanation to Frondell going over Misa. Quote, "Since the combine, there have been some rumblings that the Sharks could prefer Anton Frondell over Michael Misa in recent weeks. Chatter in the scouting circles is that this is more than a theory, but a real possibility. Why would the Sharks pass on Michael Misa? This is not a majority opinion, but there are a few teams that seem to have the Swedish pivot ahead of Misa. There's some belief that Frondell offers a more complete game, including better defensive capabilities, and has size and strength advantage without giving away as much offense." Close quote. Yeah, I agree that Anton Frondell, with his size and with his 200-foot game, he is probably more well-rounded than Michael Misa, but there is just no way that, in my opinion at least, his upside is as good as Michael Misa's. I truly believe Michael Misa is the most talented forward in this draft class, and it's really not all that close, in my opinion. So to hear this, especially as someone who, if you've been watching my draft profiles, you know I'm not the highest on Anton Frondell. This is absolutely crazy to me. But as a Blackhawks fan with their team on the clock at number 3, I am praying to the hockey gods that the San Jose Sharks are legitimately considering this, because Michael Misa at 3, I might shed a tear, Blackhawks fans. And I was thinking about this the other day. I might be more stoked if Misa falls to 3 than I was about getting Connor Bedard first overall. And that's obviously because of the mentality going into the draft, right? We knew we had the number 1 overall pick. We won the lottery. We knew it was going to be Connor Bedard. The excitement, I mean, it was still dope to go and pick Connor Bedard. I was pumped up. Don't get me wrong, but we knew that it was coming. If this surprise winds up being true, if Anton Frondell truly goes ahead of Michael Misa, I will be absolutely ecstatic. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that Chris Peters is on to something here, saying that Anton Frondell going ahead of Michael Misa is a real possibility. Interesting as well to hear what Cam Robinson of Elite Prospects had to say earlier this afternoon as well regarding Anton Frondell. And Cam Robinson was the one who last year at the NHL Draft broke the news that the Blackhawks were going to select Artem Levshinov just a couple hours before the draft went down. So I trust Cam Robinson's word, and here's what he had to say regarding Anton Frondell. Quote, "Nothing is guaranteed on draft day, but word is Anton Frondell won't make it past the 3rd pick. If that holds, the top 3 are locked, and Utah gets to shape how the rest of the top 10 unfolds." So sounds like if the Sharks are going to wind up going with Michael Misa at number 2, the Blackhawks are going to be the ones taking Anton Frondell at number 3, which shouldn't be all that surprising either, considering Frondell has been the betting favorite, according to the folks over on FanDuel. He's also just been firmly in the mix and makes sense for the Blackhawks considering what they need. So sure seems like the Blackhawks have their sights set on Anton Frondell as well, according to Cam Robinson, which wouldn't make me all that happy, but who knows? Maybe Anton Frondell still does wind up going out of Michael Misa, and he falls right into our lap at number 3. Chris Peters did have the Blackhawks selecting Michael Misa at number 3. At number 4, he has the Utah Mammoth selecting Caleb Desnoyers, which is the 2nd consecutive mock draft that I'm going through. Corey Pronman's the last one that I broke down. Also had Desnoyers going number 4 to Utah. At number 5, the Nashville Predators. Chris Peters has them selecting Roger McQueen. That would be ridiculous to me. And I know there has been some buzz around McQueen because of his size and skill combination, and his stock is rising a little bit. But for him to go ahead of James Higgins and Porter Martone, to me, I guess I could understand a little bit more of Martone because he's a winger, but Roger McQueen over James Higgins to me is just crazy. I get he's 6'5", but James Higgins definitely has the higher upside of the two, in my opinion. The Predators going with Roger McQueen at number 5 would definitely stir things up a little bit. At number 6, Chris Peters has the Philadelphia Flyers selecting Jake O'Brien. At number 7, the Boston Bruins, he has them selecting Brady Martin. And I do agree that it's going to be really interesting to see which one of those two wind up going first. For me personally, I'd take O'Brien. At number 8 here, the Seattle Kraken select Porter Martone, which I think would be really good value. And then at number 9, the Buffalo Sabres select James Higgins. He falls all the way to number 9, and Porter Martone falls all the way to number 8. I'm not saying that Chris Peters doesn't know what he's talking about here, but to me, that would just be absolutely awesome. James Higgins to number 9, Buffalo would be absolutely licking their chops if he made it that far, but that would be absolutely crazy to me. Frondell at 2, McQueen at 5, Martone at 8, Higgins at 9, and here's another crazy one, Blackhawks fans. The Anaheim Ducks at number 10 select Kashawn Aitchison. I don't see any way in the world that Aitchison goes before Radim Murtka, and I personally would select Jackson Smith ahead of Kashawn Aitchison. So that's a little bit crazy to me. Number 11, the Penguins select Jackson Smith. At number 12, the New York Rangers, select Radim Murtka, which I think would just be absolutely insane value for them. At number 13, the Detroit Red Wings select Victor Eklund, which would make a lot of sense, obviously, with Detroit's draft picks the last few seasons. But I think that would be excellent value for the Red Wings as well. At number 14, the Columbus Blue Jackets select Justin Cabeno, which, yeah, he'll probably go right around that range. At number 15, the Vancouver Canucks select Braden Coots. At number 16, the Montreal Canadiens, their first of back-to-back selections select Lyndon Lakovic, who I broke down on the show yesterday. Their second selection at number 17, they select Cole Reshny. At number 18, the Calgary Flames select Carter Bear, who I'll be getting into here in just a moment. At number 19, the St. Louis Blues select defenseman Cameron Reed. At number 20, the Columbus Blue Jackets select defenseman Sasha Boumedienne. At number 21, the Ottawa Senators select center Milton Gastrin. At number 22, the Philadelphia Flyers select right-handed defenseman Logan Hensler. At number 23, the Nashville Predators select defenseman Blake Fiedler. At number 24, the Los Angeles Kings select forward Jack Nesbitt. And then next up, the Chicago Blackhawks at number 25 select Malcolm Spence, 6'2", 200-pound winger who turned 18 back in September, one of the older players in this year's draft class, but really productive draft-eligible season with the Otters, 73 points, 32 goals, 41 assists in 65 games, was a teammate with fellow Blackhawks prospects Martin Misiak and Ty Henry, so I'm sure the Hawks front office got a really good look at Malcolm Spence, also played along with projected top overall selection Matthew Schaefer, but a really solid OHL career for Malcolm Spence. 3 years with 40-plus points, very productive OHL player, and someone who does bring a size and skill combo, as Spence is already over 200 pounds at 18 years of age, good 6'2" frame. I would love this pick at number 25 for the Blackhawks. The problem is, I don't necessarily know if Malcolm Spence is going to be available with that selection, but if he is, he's definitely someone that should be on the Blackhawks radar. At number 26, like consensus pick, according to any mock draft you look at, the Nashville Predators select goaltender Joshua Ravensbergen. At number 27, the Washington Capitals select Daniil Prokhorov, who in Corey Pronman's mock draft 2.0 that I broke down a couple of days ago, that's who he had the Blackhawks selecting at number 25. And well, at the time of me breaking that down, I was like, this seems a little bit early for Prokhorov to go. There definitely has been a rise in his stock over the past week, according to multiple different sources. I've heard a lot of teams in the latter half of this first rounder interested in someone like Daniil Prokhorov. So still someone the Blackhawks could be thinking about with 25. Chris Peters, though, has him going here, number 27, to the Washington Capitals. At number 28, the Winnipeg Jets select Bill Zanin. At number 29, the Carolina Hurricanes select Colin Potter. At number 30, the San Jose Sharks select Henry Brustowitz. At number 31, the Philadelphia Flyers select Will Horkoff, who was another one of the Blackhawks projected picks in a mock draft that I broke down. I personally think 25's a little bit early for Horkoff to go, though. And then rounding things out at number 32, the Calgary Flames select Ben Kindle. And most of these mock drafts that I'm looking at, obviously things can change, but there's been a lot of the same players from right around number 18, 19 through number 32. I'm really curious to see if it's going to wind up being those players that everyone expects later on in the first round, or if we get a couple of surprise guys, players who most of these scouts and analysts were expecting to go in the second round, someone like Daniil Prokhorov potentially, do they wind up moving up a little bit and getting selected in the latter part of the first round? A really interesting mock draft here, though, from Chris Peters. As I said, Anton Frondell at number 2, Michael Misa at number 3, Roger McQueen at number 5, Porter Martone at number 8, James Higgins at number 9, Kashawn Aitchison over Radim Murtka. An absolutely peculiar 2025 NHL mock draft, but I think that just goes to show how up in the air everything is looking with just 3 days away again before the action begins. That's going to take care of my reaction to Chris Peters' 2025 NHL mock draft. And by the way, Blackhawks fans, on Thursday's show, be on the lookout for my NHL 2025 draft rankings. I'll be going through my full top 32 rankings on Thursday's episode, giving you my full 2 cents on the first round of the 2025 NHL draft. But coming up in just a moment, before I close out today's episode, still got to dive into Carter Bear's 2025 NHL Draft Profile. Real quick, just wanted to say thank you to everyone for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen. Here to start off your day. For your second listen, make sure to go and check out the Locked On NHL podcast, where there is no offseason, bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter most with the local coverage you love from Locked On. And you can now find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. Segment 3, yet another 2025 NHL Draft Profile to get into on the show here today. And as a reminder, I've recently covered players like Lyndon Lakovic, Victor Eklund, Justin Cabinot, guys who were expected to go in the middle of the first round. And the reason that I'm doing that, Blackhawks fans, and I will also go over again all the players in the latter half of the first round that I think the Blackhawks could be considering with their second selection at number 25. Well, at this point in time, the latest updates make it sound like the Blackhawks likely aren't going to be trading back from number 3 any longer. But I also wouldn't be surprised to see them move up from number 25 in this year's draft, just because they're at the point where it's quality over quantity. They have so many draft picks still these next couple of years. Wouldn't put it past Kyle Davidson, and wouldn't be the first time we've seen him package a couple of draft picks together to go and move up in order to get his guy. And I wouldn't be surprised to see KD do that here from number 25, maybe moving up to, 17, 18, 19, or a couple of picks ahead in the early 20s to go and select someone who he really likes in particular. So that's the reason why I'm still going through some of these players. Today, though, I wanted to get into 18-year-old forward Carter Bear, another one who's kind of had a polarizing last couple of months, according to different scouts and analysts. He's a 6 foot, 180-pound forward who's played both the center ice position and the wing so far in his junior career. Turned 18 in early November, so a little bit on the older side for this year's draft class. But he spent the last 2 seasons playing in the WHL for the Everett Silvertips this past year, recording 82 points, 40 goals, and 42 assists in just 56 games of action as the team's alternate captain. Unfortunately, his season was cut short due to an Achilles injury, which I think has led to some scouts being a little bit scared about his development these next couple of years, because obviously skating is such a main focal point of the NHL in today's game. But was one of the most productive players in all of the WHL this year, had right around a 1.65 points per game margin, but slowed down a little bit at the end of the year, perhaps due to that injury, but still finished with 1.46 points per game, which was better than both Caden Lindstrom and Tija Ginla, who came out of the WHL last year and in a much better NHL draft than this one, were both top 6 selections. So really good productivity out of Carter Bear. Again, 40 goals in 56 games, along with 42 assists, even in a season that was cut short. Very strong season out of Carter Bear, and a nice uptick in production overall from the 57 points in 67 games that he had the year prior. But as far as the rankings go on Carter Bear, Elite Prospects has him ranked number 8 inside the top 10. Bob McKenzie has him at number 14. Craig Button has him at number 17. Tony Ferrari, as he always does, going against the grain, has Carter Bear here inside the top 10 as well, like Elite Prospects at number 9. McKean's Hockey, the lowest on Bear of the bunch, has him ranked 21st. Chris Peters has him ranked 17th. Daily Faceoff has him ranked 15th. Dobber Prospects, high on Bear as well, has him ranked 10th, while the Hockey News, to round things out, has him ranked 15th. As far as the strengths and weaknesses go when watching Carter Bear, I absolutely love this kid. I think the number one thing that stands out to me is that he's a jack of all trades type of player. Like, this guy can give you a little bit of everything, and I don't think there's really one glaring weakness in his game. He can really give you, like I said, a little bit of everything out there on the ice. But his best offensive trait, undoubtedly, to me, is his playmaking. I think he's a really good passer. He reads the ice and sees plays develop really well in transition. He makes great, touch passes, stretch passes, tap passes. He just sees openings that not everyone does out there on the ice, and he knows how to get his guys the puck with speed to go and beat defensemen, or knows when to go and find someone cutting backdoor for a great tap-in look. He just sees plays develop overall at a really high rate and seems to always be moving as well and kind of giving defenders something to think about at all points in time. So a really smart player overall on the offensive side of things. And then I think he does have a good, diverse offensive game as well. As I mentioned, 40 goals in 56 games this year in the W. That is nothing to blink an eye at. He's not, the best pure shooter in this draft class. He doesn't have the best power. He's got some really good accuracy, and he can beat goaltenders one-on-one. But I think one of his best traits, again, along with his playmaking, he's keeping defenders on their toes at all times. And when they're on their heels, if you will, he's going to make them pay because he's so good at finding those little soft areas in coverage to get a quick wrist shot off, or just knows where to be at the right times. Again, I think his hockey IQ and the way that he sees plays develop does him a lot of favors and will translate very well over to the next level, but is a capable shooter enough to beat goaltenders one-on-one. I think he'll have a good shot at the next level, capable of being a 20-goal scorer. But there's a lot to like with Carter Bear in his off-puck game as well. He's someone who, despite, only being 180 pounds and 6 feet, I mean, it's a decent frame, but nothing massive or anything. He'll be physical out there. He's not afraid to go in, finish a check, or go and get involved along the boards and get in those battles. He loves playing with a little bit of sandpaper, with a little bit of an edge to him. And I absolutely love that about Carter Bear. And then just overall, he brings high energy and high intensity. Like every time he's out there, you feel like you're getting maximum effort on every single shift out of Carter Bear. And he works hard on the defensive side of things. Driven on the back check whenever he loses the puck. He wants to go and get it back right away. And overall, I just think he plays a style of hockey. Again, he can give you kind of everything you ask from him. And I also think the way that he plays, like high leverage situations, playoff intensity, that type of atmosphere, yeah, that's going to work wonders for Carter Bear. So a really good skill set that I liked from this latter half of the draft class. Does have some weaknesses, though. I would say the biggest one is his skating mechanics. If you go and watch the tape, go and watch the highlights on him, it's a little bit odd. Well, probably one of the oddest mechanics that I've seen. He's like a little bit hunched over at times and like kind of moves his feet in a weird way to get going, but does have some good top speed. I think, there's not going to be a ton of upside for him there, and he's not going to be someone who blows by you and gets a lot of breakaways. That's not going to be his game, but I do think he's a capable enough skater to keep up. He's just not someone who's really going to be, I think, creating a ton or driving play himself by just his pure speed and transition. It's mostly with, again, how he sees the ice, recognizes open teammates, really good give and go passer as well. I think that was something I talked about with, might have been Lyndon Lakovic the other day, but that's something that Carter Bear really does well. He's not trying to go and beat defenders one-on-one with his moves. He's trying to make a quick pass and then find an opening to go and get it back, or just provide his teammates another passing option. So just really, really good hockey IQ overall, but the skating is never going to be the driving force of his production or of his skills at the next level. He also will definitely have to gain weight to play the type of role in the type of game that he wants to have success in the NHL. 180 pounds ain't going to cut it. But once he gets up, around a $190, $195, 200, yeah, with grown man strength, Carter Bear is going to be a problem. Also, there's some question marks about whether he can be a center iceman. And if he is a center iceman, it just feels like he'll be more so effective with his 200-foot game. As a winger, I think there's a chance for him to score more goals, but I don't know if he's going to have the full impact all over the ice that he would at the center ice position. So that's a really valid question, I think, about Carter Bear. Is he going to be a center iceman? And if he is, I feel like he's probably more of a third-line center than a second-line center because, again, the offense isn't necessarily the driving point of what makes him great. It's that he can provide you with a little bit of everything. And then also definitely a concern is that Achilles. It doesn't seem to be anything serious from what I've heard, but again, kind of feels like it's enough to maybe throw some teams off of him and have some scouts just go with other guys who are in a very same comparison range. So those are kind of the knocks on Carter Bear. But overall, I mean, I really like what this kid brings to the table. I don't think he'll make it past number 17. Where did Chris Peters just have him going in this mock draft? He had Carter Bear going 16 to the Calgary Flames. Yeah, I think 16, 17 is probably the max. But if he falls further than that, I'd be all aboard with general manager Kyle Davidson packaging a couple of picks together to go and get someone like this. I know he doesn't have that typical speed that Kyle Davidson loves to select, but at the same point in time, we are going to have different type of forward prospects in this pool. And Carter Bear is definitely someone who provides a little bit of a different style than what the Blackhawks already have stockpiled. So he would definitely be intriguing to me if he falls far enough for the Blackhawks to possibly go and make a move. But what I see Carter Bear being in the NHL is a middle six forward who can provide you with a little bit of everything. And all teams want to have a guy like that, especially if they're trying to make a good run in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So I really like Carter Bear's makeup. I wouldn't be surprised to see him be like a 20-goal, 30-assist guy or a 25-35 guy at the next level. He doesn't have the highest ceiling, but I think he has a remarkably low floor, and that's very valuable in the middle to later picks of a weaker NHL draft like we got in this one. As far as his NHL comparisons, I've seen Zach Hyman. I don't really think I love Carter Bear. I don't necessarily seeing him have the offensive upside of Zach Hyman. Brandon Hagel is another one that I've seen thrown around there. Again, I don't know if he's ever going to truly produce like Brandon Hagel has these last couple of seasons for the Tampa Bay Lightning, but I did see that Bear says he molds his game after Brandon Hagel. The two real players that I think make the most sense to me as far as a comparison goes, Dylan Holloway, I think is a pretty fair comparison. We just saw him a couple of years ago get selected by the Edmonton Oilers, now plays for the St. Louis Blues. Again, someone who doesn't have the highest offensive upside, but can provide you with a little bit of everything, has that sandpaper and size to him, and that's what brings value to his game come Stanley Cup playoff time. I also think another guy who's played for the St. Louis Blues for a while, Braden Shen, is a similar one to me that what Carter Bear kind of reminds me of as a young man. That's probably my NHL comparisons, Holloway and Braden Shen. But again, I really like what I saw out of Carter Bear here. And like Michael Misa, I'm just going to keep my fingers crossed and pray to the hockey gods that he somehow falls in general manager Kyle Davidson's lap. But that's going to take care of today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks, everyone. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast. That way you don't miss out on any of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Until the next episode, everyone, enjoy the rest of your Tuesdays. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.